Hi, everyone. We're going to continue our Winter Wonderland theme and recap the fractions concepts that we've learned over the past week. Least common denominator, simplifying fractions, adding and subtracting fractions, comparing fractions. Let's start with least common denominator. What is it? We remembered that the least common denominator is the smallest number that each denominator will divide evenly into. So if I have two fractions, 1/2 and 2/3, the least common denominator will be 6. Notice that 2 and 3 can both divide evenly into 6. Why do we care? We care about the least common denominator because we can use it to build equivalent fractions. And equivalent fractions make it easy for us to compare or add and subtract fractions. So while I do not know how to add 1/2 plus 2/3, I do know how to add their equivalent fractions, 3/6 and 4/6. Our new fractions make it easier for us to do math with. So how do we do this? The first way Ms. Wilczynski taught us was to multiply the denominators. If we have two fractions, 1/2 and 2/3, we simply multiply the denominators and we get 6. We then use that denominator 6 to build the equivalent fractions. So if we have 1/2, we would, for our equivalent fraction, write 6 in the denominator. We would notice that 2 goes into 6 3 times. And so we'd multiply the numerator by 3 to get 3. And so our equivalent fraction for 1/2 is equal to 3/6. We repeat this process for the 2/3. And again, we write down the 6. We see that 3 goes into 6 2 times. 2 times 2 is equal to 4. Our equivalent fraction for 2/3 is equal to 4/6. How else can we do this? Another way Ms. Wilczynski had showed us was that the smaller denominator may evenly divide into the larger denominator. So how would this work? Step 1. First, we check to see, is the smaller denominator a multiple of the larger denominator? So for example, we look at 2 and we look at 8. We see that 2 is a multiple of 8. So 8 is the least common denominator. So again, we use 8 to build the equivalent fractions. And we see that 1/2 is equal to 4/8. And for 3/8, we simply use that fraction. The fraction doesn't need an equivalent. The most common way that we are going to be using is to use our multiples list to find the least common denominator. So you remember the multiples list that we created this week? So we have two fractions, 1/3 and 3/4. We're going to look at our multiples list and we're going to see that both 3 and 4 have a multiple of 12. So 12 is the least common denominator. Again, we use 12 to build our equivalent fractions, and we get 4/12 and 9/12. So now that we've learned about least common denominator, let's learn about simplifying fractions. And I'm going to hand it over to Tim and Moby